In this video, I'm going to go over 15 TSI questions to help us get ready for our post-test on quantitative reasoning. All right, so the first question is asking about a rational number. So if you remember from your days in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, rational numbers are numbers that you can express as two ratios or like a fraction, or it has a value after the decimal that stops in some place value. All right, so a good example of an irrational number, which goes on forever with no terminating value, would be pi. This is probably the most common irrational number. This would become the square root of 20. And the square root of 20, if you were to type that into your calculator, it's going to end when you're looking at the window on the calculator, but technically it goes on forever. And then same thing with square root of 2. That would also go on forever, even though when you type in the calculator, it looks like it ends. So the only one that's actually going to be a rational number is this one, because you can reduce this to be the square root of 3 over 75, which reduces to the square root of 1 over 25. Then if you keep simplifying, you can give each of those their own radicals. The square root of 1 is 1, and the square root of 25 is 5. So if you wrote that as a decimal, it would be 0. I'm sorry about that. It would be 0.2, which you notice is going to stop in the tens place. So the only rational number is going to be 0.2. So B. Let's try number 2. All right, number 2. Number 2, the expression 3 plus 9 plus 4, those in parentheses, equals 3 plus 9 in parentheses plus 4, demonstrates which property of addition. So the idea here is you'll notice the order is the same. It goes 3, then 9, then 4 on both sides. But because they're changing the parentheses, the grouping, that means you're going to change the order in which you do it. But because they're changing the grouping with parentheses, we call this the associative property. Give you an example of the distributed property. If you had like 3 times 9 plus 4, the distributed property would be 3 times 9 plus 3 times 4. The identity property for addition would be like 3 plus 0 equals 3. You're not changing the identity. And the commutative property would be like 3 plus 4 equals 4 plus 3. So the order changes, but the value does not. So that's why number 2 is the associative property. Let's do number 3. All right, number 3 says on a map, 2.5 inches represents 80 miles in real life. So I'm going to use X to represent miles in real life. All right, so I have 2.5 inches is representing 80 miles in real life. All right, and so then some value B in inches, so B inches on the map, is how many miles in real life, or X. So if I go ahead and do some cross multiplication here, I get 2.5 times X equals 80 times B. All right, and then if I divide both sides by 2.5, I'll get what X is equal to. All right, so if you don't know what 2.5 times 80 divided by 2.5 is, we can go ahead and type that in. So 80 divided by 2.5 gives us 32. So 32B for the answer for number 3, or D. Okay, number 4. Terry has a synthetic fabric. He throws away 2/3 of it due to an insect infestation. So he starts with infestation. That's a hard word to say, infestation. There we go. Minus 2/3 that he throws away. So that would mean 1/3 is left. Then another 1/4 of the remaining fabric is thrown away. So if Terry throws away 1/4 of the remaining fabric, so that's 1/4 of the remaining, right? Of means multiply. Of the remaining 1/3 is 1/12 is thrown away. So what fraction of the original length of fabric does Terry have now? So I first find out how much is thrown away. So that'd be 1/3 plus 1/12. If we get a common denominator, that's going to be, 4/12 plus 1/12. Well, excuse me, I lied. That's not right. It's because I should have said 2/3 was thrown away. There we go. That makes more sense. So getting a common denominator, that's going to be 8/12 plus 1/12, which is 9/12. So this is how much is thrown away. So when it says, what fraction of the original length of fabric does Terry have now? You'd have 1 minus the amount that was thrown away, which is 9/12, which would give us 3/12 remaining. And if you reduce 3/12, you would get 1/4. So that is the amount of fabric that Terry has now. Okay, number 5. There are 160 patients at the hospital today. Which of the following cannot be the ratio of male to female patients at the hospital? So the way this works is if they give you a total, right, 160 is the total. When you add up these numbers, they must be equal to a factor of the total for them to be an appropriate ratio. So 12 plus 20 is 32. So just go into your calculator, and what is 160 divided by 32? You get a whole number, so this one would work, all right? That ratio would be okay, so it's not going to be A. Let's add 25 plus 15. It's going to give you 40. 160 divided by 40 gives you 4. Could have done that in your head, Douglas. So that's going to be fine. Let's do 9. 160 divided by 9. See how that one is not a whole number? So this one is going to be our answer. I'll prove this last one here, 160 divided by 8. We actually know that one. 160 divided by 8 would be 20. So again, the idea is when you add the two numbers in your ratio, they must be a factor of the total. If they're not, then it cannot be a ratio. All right. Number 6, what is n in terms of t? So I'm going to rewrite the original fraction, but put t over 1. So this is now a proportion. If I want to essentially get rid of this and write it as an equation, I would multiply diagonally to get cross products. So negative 3n times t plus 2t equals 1 times 2n minus 1 times 5. Now, since I'm solving for n in terms of t, I'm going to move the stuff that has an n to the left side. So this is going to stay here, all right? But then my 2t is going to move to the other side. And this 2n, right, this 2n right here is going to move to the other side with the other n. If I factor out an n, I get negative 3t minus 2. And to get n by itself, I divide it to the other side. So this is the answer. The reason if you started looking at your answer choices, you don't see it, is because you can actually factor out a negative 1 in both the top and the bottom. And if you cross out those negative 1s, you're left with 2t plus 5 over 3t plus 2, which is b. All right, so that's it for 6. Let's go to number 7. P is inversely proportional to the square of Q. So Q squared, put a K up here for constant. When Q is 2, the value of P is 3. So P is 3 when Q is 2. All right, so this would be K over 4 or K equals to 12, right? Moving that 4 over with multiplication. So this is my equation now, 12 over Q squared. And it wants to know what is the value of Q when P is 6. So plug in 6 for P, and let's solve for Q here. So that's going to be 6 times Q squared equals 12. Move the 6 over with division. 12 divided by 6 is 2. How do you get rid of that square? We're going to take the square root of both sides. So that's why Q is equal to the square root of 2, which is B. Number 8, Paul increased the price of a pair of shoes by 20%. After a week, he decreased the new price by 20%. What is the overall change in the price? So I'm going to just pick a random price. I'm going to pick $100. Probably pretty standard here. So if we're going to increase it by 20%, what is 20% of $100? So that would be $20. So now we're up to 120. But then it says after a week, Paul decreases this 120 price by 20%. So what's 20% of 120? Again, you can go into the calculator and do 20% of 120 if you want, right? 0.2 times 120 if you want. Or what I do is, what's 10% of $120? That's $12. If you multiply $12 times 2, that gives you $24. So if I reduce 120 minus 24, I'm left with 96. So now the price of the shoe is $96. What is the overall change? Well, it started at $100 and we've gone down $96. So you guys would have learned in middle school how to find your percentage change as your new value minus your old value over the old value. So in this case, $96 minus $100 over $100, which would give you negative $4 over $100, and 4 hundredths is 4%. So it's a 4% decrease. All right. And that's how you figure out number 8. All right, number 9. Mona is making a cocktail by mixing 7 parts water, 3 parts grape juice, and 2 parts apple juice. If she wants the percentage of grape juice to be 30% of the cocktail, how many parts will she need to add? So first I want to use X to be the number of parts of grape juice to add. All right, so if I just do grape juice, that's 3 parts grape juice by however many parts she adds, over the total, which is going to be the 7 plus 3 plus 2 value. So that's going to be 12 plus the number of parts that she's going to add, and we want that to be equal to 30%. So this is how we set up that rational equation. If you want to move the 12 plus x over, you get 3 plus x equals 0.3 times 2, which is 3.6, plus 0.3 times x, which is 0.3x. Get your x's to one side. So x minus 0.3x is going to be 0.7x. 3.6 minus 3 is going to be 0.6. Divide both sides by 0.7, and you get this is x, right? And if you were to change, you can go into decimal, or go into the calculator and do this, or you'll notice that these have the same 6 and 7 in the tens place, so that reduces to 6/7 as a fraction. So the answer is going to be A. Number 10, arrange the following numbers in descending order. So from highest to lowest or greatest to least. So if you need to get a decimal approximation for these, you can. 1/2 squared is going to be 1/4, which is 0.25. That one's already a decimal, 0.21. This is 0.17. I don't know 1/7 as a decimal, so let's type that in real quick. So 1 over 7 is approximately 0.143. That's 0.23. 3 to the negative third power is 1 over 3 cubed. 1 over 3 cubed is 1/27th, which is going to be 0.037. And then we have 0.28. So looks like the highest one is going to be 0.28, which makes sense. All the answer choices start with that. Then we're going to go to 0.25, which is 1/2 squared. So that doesn't work for A or D. Then after that, I'm going to have 0.23, and then 0.21, then 0.17, then 0.143, and then 0.037. So B is the answer for ordering these numbers from greatest to least. 11, Paul has apples, oranges, and pineapples in a ratio of 9 to 11 to 12. All right, we're trying to figure out if he has a total of 286 pieces of fruit, how many oranges does he have? Well, let's add up the ratio numbers, right? Because I mentioned this in a previous problem. So 9 plus 11 plus 2 is going to be 22. And then remember, that needs to be a factor of the total number of pieces of fruit. So what's 286 divided by 22? which is going to be 13. So that means 13 is going to be, for each part, is going to be one piece of fruit. So let me write it like this. So 13 pieces of fruit. Sorry about that. Fruit for each part. Okay, so in terms of how many oranges, when I look at number of oranges, we have that ratio is 11. So if I multiply 13 times 11 parts, that will give me my total number of oranges that Paul has. So if you multiply 13 times 10, that's 130. And then if you add another 13, that's going to give you 143 for the total number of oranges. Number 12, Ruma can clean the fish tank alone in 3 hours. When Ruma works with Alex, they can finish cleaning the tank in 2 hours. If Alex takes Y hours to clean the fish tank alone, find the value of Y. So the way that you want to think about this is for one job, you can do the rate times the time is equal to how long it takes to do one job. All right. But if you have two people, you have the first person's rate times the time plus the second person's rate times the time will be equal to one job. So the way that I think about this for Ruma, all right, Ruma is cleaning the fish tank alone in 3 hours. So that would mean we have, let me put this right here. That means we're going to have her rate is going to be 1 over, and it takes her 3 hours to do it. For Alex, it says it takes Y hours for Alex to clean the fish tank alone. That's going to be his or her rate is going to be 1 over Y hours. So if we were to use this formula here, we have 1/3 plus 1 over Y times the time it takes for them to clean it together, which is 2 hours, and that's equal to one job. All right, so if I get a common denominator to add 1/3 plus 1 over Y, that means my common denominator is going to be 3Y. The first one needs to have a Y, so that's going to be Y plus. The second one needs a 3, so Y plus 3. All right, so if you wanted to, you could move that 2 over to get Y plus 3 over 3Y equals 1/2. Now you have a proportion, so you're ready to do cross products. So 2Y plus 6 equals 3Y. Getting your Y to one side, you get 3Y minus 2Y, which is Y. So Y, the rate at which Alex, or I should say the amount of hours it would take Alex to clean the fish tank alone, is going to be 6. Okay, 13. Which of the following is an irrational number? So remember, kind of like we did on the very first one, an irrational number means that the decimal would go on, the numbers after the decimal will go on forever with no pattern, and they would not terminate. So let's do, what's 684 divided by 19? Because I'm guessing that's going to be, so 36. So this would reduce to the square root of 36, which we know is 6, and that is a rational number. All right, so it's not that. The square root of 10,000, I think it's going to be, let's see, square root of 10,000 is going to be 100, so that is a rational number. See how this one, they're trying to mess you up with D. It actually does stop in, let's see, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s place. So a lot of students will think, oh, it's going to be D because it goes on forever, but it doesn't. It actually terminates in the 10,000s place, so D is rational. So the only one that's irrational is the square root of the prime number 71. That would go on forever. It would never terminate. It would not have a pattern. Okay, 14. Jared deposits $4,100 into an account. The money earns 5% simple interest per year. If he withdraws all the money after 20 months, how much money will he have? So to find simple interest, we multiply the principal, so how much money they deposit, times the rate, times the time. So that would mean 4,100 times the rate, 0.05. Now the time is a little tricky here. It says 20 months, and we're thinking per year. So 20 months out of 12 months in a year would give us the amount of time that Jared has left the money into the account, or in the account. So if I multiply in a calculator 4,100 times 0.05 times 20/12, this would give us the amount of simple interest. So roughly $341.67. And then to find how much money Jared is able to withdraw, you're going to add that simple interest to the original amount that Jared has deposited. So 4,100 plus 341.67 would give us C as the answer. All right, let's use that same understanding to help us with 15. So we have this person is depositing $6,200 in a bank account, and they want to have $7,750 after 5 years. So that means in terms of interest, I would need to subtract 7,750 minus 6,200. Make sure I got that right. 7,750. Yep. So I want to have interest of 1,000. So my simple interest is 1,550. If I use that same formula, so 1,550, I'm depositing 6,200 into the account. I'm trying to find the rate, and in terms of time, I'm doing 5 years. All right, so if I were to multiply 6,200 times 5 and then divide that over, that would give me the rate. You could also divide by 6,200 and then by 5. Either way, you get the same thing. So 1,550 divided by 6,200, and then whatever that number is, 0.25 divided by 5. So the rate is going to be 0.05, which is 5%. B. All right, guys, that's it for the review. Make sure to go over your review questions, and good luck on the post test.